Well, thank you everyone for attending this session and sticking with us, I guess, till the end of the afternoon. I'm Denis Boudreau. I'm a senior consultant at BAASS. I'm based in beautiful Dieppe, New Brunswick, and I've been doing this for I'm going to say just over 20 years, probably 23 or 24 years that I've been eating and breeding a Sage 300. So when I was asked to put on a presentation about the Sage 300 operation suites, the tips and tricks, I thought of kind of sharing some of the features that you own today. So pretty much what we've seen so far this afternoon is we've seen the auto simply, and we've seen the barcoding, and we've seen the Tyrox solutions. Definitely not to discourage you from procuring those additional modules, but if you own Sage 300 operations modules today, pretty much everything that I'm going to show you in the sessions, you own it and you have access to it. Okay, so the objective of the session will basically focus on the purchase order entry, inventory control, and the ops inquiry modules. So really on the operation side. Okay, and as far as learning objectives, so the idea is to give you some tips around configuring Sage 300 to enhance your productivity. So I kind of call this the quality of life. So sometimes they can be minor efficiencies or minor improvements. But again, if you can solve a few of the pain points that perhaps you have today, whether it's an extra click or you're telling yourself, I wish I could do this. Well, hopefully today you can learn some of those tips to make your life easier on a daily basis. Okay. Again, don't forget, if you do have questions, I will leave time at the end for questions, by all means. The sessions are kind of in blocks of 25 minutes. I did leave the 5 minutes break to perhaps get a drink of water, but I mean, I don't really have like a clean cutoff. I will monitor time and ensure that we break accordingly. And Ailey, by all means, if you see that I keep going, just stop me. We'll take a 5 and then we'll keep on trucking. So, but I'll make sure that we have time at the end for questions.
Perfect.
Okay. So the first one, and I'll be jumping back and forth, just FYI, I mean, between the slides, and I don't want to make this just a slide presentation, so I will actually be showing you what I'm talking about with our demo environment. So the first area that I want to touch base on is import templates. So throughout Sage, you're able to import and export, whether it's master files or whether it's transactions. So if you think about the operation suites, whether it's importing or setting up a bulk of items, whether it's at the original implementation time or perhaps you're picking up a new product line, you have the ability to import items, whether it's now from the inventory control standpoint, whether it's items, price list, vendor details, manufacturing order, reorder points, like all of those, all of that information can be imported. Now, what Sage has done, I mean, over time, I can't tell you how many times we've received the request is, can you provide us with an import template so we're able to import transactions in there. And up to a few versions ago, I would basically recommend customers to input a record, go file export, and then use that as a template. But what Sage has done I believe this is since 2018, perhaps 2019, that when you actually install Sage, you actually have pre-populated templates that Sage is providing. So I'm just going to show you where they're located. So within Sage, when you actually install Sage, if you click on the help and about Sage 300 and you go to system info, so help about Sage 300 and system info, the reason why I'm pointing you to this location is this tells you where the shared data directory is located. So if I actually copy this and I go into just to File Explorer, the import templates folder by default is located within that shared directory. into a folder called, guess what, import templates. So pretty straightforward. So if I double click on import templates, you can see that based on the modules that I've actually installed, those import templates were installed into that, were put into that directory. Okay, so for instance, if you look at the IC item, so IC item 1 is one of the templates that exists in here. And you'll notice my Excel will take a second to come up here. So again, right now I'm highlighting an example from a master files, but just remember that pretty much transactionals, whether it's purchase requisitions, whether it's an order entry, those can all be important to the system. So the first one is kind of a README, kind of highlights a little bit of depending on the templates, gives you a bit more insights about the template. And then you can see at the bottom that each tab basically, and those are important as you're importing into the software, they're required for Sage to actually recognize what information to look at. And actually the templates actually contains, for the most part, at least one record to give you an example of what they're looking for the fields. Okay, so I just wanted to share that because I know over time, again, this is not necessarily saving you time on a day in, day out basis, but if you have any amount of transactions or master files to update or import, price list, for instance, then you can certainly use templates to import, export transactions or information. Okay, so that's been on, and again, this is something that gets installed automatically and has been since, I believe, 2019. Okay. The second one that I wanted to touch base on is the shortcuts. My comment on this is a lot of us have been, I hate to use the word trained, but I've been educated from a user that's been educated from another one that's been educated maybe 20 years ago. So I find it amazing every time that I walk into either to a customer, or if I put on these sessions, that people may know about the Finder on the F5, but people may not know about the Zoom function. So I just wanted to share a few of the main ones that are kind of, if you don't know about it, or if you weren't told about it, or if you actually don't go looking for them, they're not quite evident on how you can make use of them. So the first one is the F4, so display calendars, and I'll highlight that feature on the demo shortly. Demo environment. The F5 is a Finder. Again, that one I would hope that everyone is aware of the F5 from the Finder perspective, but I just wanted to make sure that this one was included as well. The F7, the Go button. So this is kind of the refresh. I'll show you which screens have that. The activate the zoom on the F9. This one here I will show because lots of users don't realize, especially on the purchase order screens or the order entry screens, there's a lot of fields in the detail section, and the F9 zoom basically allows to see all those screens in one, all those fields into one screen. So I'll show you that quickly. And then the alternate keys, just to get to the, you could pretty much, once you're on the proper screen within your Sage 300 Classic Desktop, you're able to use the alternate and then the shortcut keys to access either different tabs or different fields. And then the plus or minus sign to activate the calculator. This one here as well is one that I tend to kind of leave out when I do education training on orientation or tips and tricks on general navigation, but it's one that can be useful if you need to calculate any amount. So when you're into number fields, you're able to use this. So just on this, so if I just to display, so if I'm into the, let's say, the order entry, let's just open up an order. I'm running, as an FYI, I'm running Sage 2020 product update 1 or product update 2 right now. So if you, let's see if I pull in a customer. So anywhere from the when you're onto an order date, like anytime that you're on a date field, if you hit the F4, then the F4 will activate the calendar. So again, just little things, but that, instead of reaching out for the mouse, if your hands are on the keyboard already, that you're able to actually activate and select the proper switches from right from your keyboard. So, and once you have it activated, if you do page up, page down, will actually flip between the different months. And of course, if you go back, if you want to go back to today's date, which is a session date, I mean, if you click on today, then you'll revert back to this. So that's the F4 key. The second one, well, the finder. So anywhere that you have the magnifying glass, I have some customers once told me, this is, what are you referring to? Are you referring to the frying pan? So I guess could, now it looks more than like a finder, but back in a few versions ago, I guess the frying pan could have been mistook for a frying pan. So the F9, the finder is the F5 for the key. While I'm on the F5 for the key, I do want to highlight as well is in some of the finders, you will notice that if I click on the customer, for instance, and hit the F5, right now you'll see that my finders actually went straight to the actual detail. But if you click on global settings and go to filter first, what this will do is the next time I open this finder, so if I click on F5, then I can start typing right away. So I don't need to bring my cursor in the filter field, and I can just basically, right now, if it's customer number contains, if I go 105, then the customer 105 would show up automatically. So just to, I wanted to touch base on this. Most of the screens within Sage, most of the Finder screens are configured to go to filter first, but like as you just saw, this one, there's definitely sporadic fields where this is not set up as a default. So again, not a big thing, but I mean, this can be an annoying thing that all the time, if you wonder, like, why do I have on certain screens? Why do I have to go and click on the Finder? That's from the global settings and go to filter first. Okay. The F7, so the F7 keys for, let me think here. I know there's one that I can, if I go look at order entry, for instance, let's say an IC. So if I go to inventory control under stats inquiries, if I look at the transaction history inquiry, for instance, so the go button is kind of this sheet with an arrow. So what that is, so from a programming standpoint, is this is required when you have screens, inquiry screen specifically, that you're able to put in different parameters. So when you go and change parameters, then perhaps you want to basically go and fetch. You're telling the system to go and fetch the data based on those new parameters. So right now, if I was to basically fetch all item numbers, all account sets, I could either click on this, or if I click on the F7, when I'm on the screen, it'll know to basically refresh the data. So F7 instead of clicking on that icon. Again, the idea is to have your hands on the keyboard, so trying to not reach out to the mouse as much as possible. Okay. The other one was the F9 active zoom button. So the F9, as I shared earlier, a lot of people don't really realize, and I'm actually human nature, like I've been, as I shared, I mean, my days with dealing with Sage 300 goes back all the way back to version 1, and some of those features weren't necessarily available back then. So my reflex is always to kind of go in and use the screens the same ways. But if you look at the order entry screen in the detail sections, for whomever is using the detail sections, you'll see that there's a lot of fields, right? I mean, now option 1 is I can right click and I can hide fields. I mean, I can, the ones that are not required. And on this one, for instance, like areas like unit weights, percentage discounts, like if you're not making use of those features, that you can certainly hide this. But sometimes even after hiding the fields that are not required, that you're not using, it can still be a challenge to remove the scrolling from left to right. Okay, so if I'm into the detail section and I hit the F9, what I will get at is a zoom view. So pretty much all the fields that are in this detailed sections are now visible within one screen. Okay, and from here I can navigate from the tab, shift tab, or just click on the fields on the field that I want, and then just type it, right? So right now I'm looking at line 1. I can go on to the line 2, line 3, line 4, right? So, and then if I need to add a new line, I just click on the plus, and then I'm good to go for the future line. Okay, so the F9 being the zoom. Purchase order is another one that's that's common, where there can be a lot of columns in the detail section. Okay, F9 for the zoom. And the last one on that page was the plus or minus. So the plus or minus, any data field that you're on. So any data field that you're on. So for instance, if I'm looking at the, let's say on the pricing side, so if I click on this 1770 for you pricing unit, I don't know, let's say I wanted to actually double that price. So if I actually have the cursor on that field and I hit the plus on the keyboard, then up pops the calculator. And if there's a value in that field, then the calculator will contain the value already. So technically right now, if I want to multiply this by 2, I could go on with the mouse and then use this as a calculator, or I could just go in and hit the star on my keyboard for the multiplier. And it was hard to see, but when I hit the star, the X was clicked. And then if I hit 2 to multiply by 2, then if I hit the enter on the keyboard, now I'm at 3540, which is 1770 times 2. Okay. Now, if I want to paste the value back, I could click on the paste, or if I hit the letter P on the keyboard, now I've just pasted the value. So again, not a big thing, but I mean, I've seen a lot of occasions where I would kind of look out over someone's shoulders and putting in transactions, and then how goes the calculator, the actual physical calculators on the desktop or on their desk. And then when I mentioned about the plus, I mean, a lot of times I'll get like, wow, I didn't realize that this actually existed. Okay, pretty much those features have been there for a long time, but again, I thought I would make use of this sessions to perhaps highlight some of the again, just little minor things that can make your life easier on a day-to-day basis. So the next section is about organizing your desktop. So the one comment that I hear and that I share as well with people is, from a navigation standpoint, not that straightforward to actually get to the screen, or like if you're new to Sage 300, not that obvious to navigate to the actual screen that you need to be to either transact, or from whether it's a report or whether it's a configuration screen. Once you're on the screen, pretty user friendly, but sometimes how to get there is not that obvious. So I just want to show you a few things around organizing your desktop, and examples of that would be, I don't know, perhaps at month end, right? I would want to have a section where I don't want to forget about what steps I need to take for month end. Perhaps I need to print my my age trial balance, my payable listing, my inventory control reports, maybe my PO audit and clearing report, right? Goods received, not invoice, from an operational standpoint. So I'll show you how you can go in and create your month end folder, or perhaps I want to create like a dentist favorite folder. Okay. Alternate to that as well is the visual process flow. So this is like kind of the first one that I highlighted with the folders, is kind of the quick way, an easy way of organizing things. Not super fancy, but it does the job. From a visual process flow standpoint, definitely fancier. Like you've got a screenshot at the bottom right here, highlighting like what's possible. This is an example of an out-of-the-box visual process flow available with Sage. So when you actually install it, you get default visual process flows, and you're actually able to customize them. Now, let me go into my demo environment, and I'll show you a few tips and tricks, I guess, around the folders. Right. So, for instance, if I want to create one, perhaps for month end, okay. So if I click on my on the top under the company. So right now I'm just logged into the sample company. You'll notice that this environment actually has manufacturing and manufacturing lot and production planning and QC installed. But providing that I have the rights in under my credentials to customize company desktop. So that's what I need though as a user to accomplish this. So within admin services, if you look at the, I'm going to touch base on this briefly, but as long as I'm able to customize company desktop as a user, then I'm able to do this. So if I click on the top one and I go object from the top menu and I click on new and I click on folder. So again, I went on object, new, and folder, and now I'm able to create one called perhaps Montana. Okay. I might be an administrator, and I'm actually, what I'm creating here could be for all users. So if I click on all users, then of course, pretty straightforward, all of the Sage trained users would basically get to see that folder. So heads up on this, if I'm creating one, for instance, for payroll, just be careful, because if I all of a sudden put shortcuts and reports, custom reports that are payroll related or maybe GL related, that could be sensitive from a data perspective. You just got to be careful that you don't click on all users if you don't want to. Okay. So, and you could go and change icons if I wanted to pick a special icons on this to differentiate my Montana folder. So if I click on finish, now you'll see that my Montana folder is actually on the left-hand side. If I click on company, same information basically appears here on a different format. Okay, so what I can do from here is, because we're talking operational, so I'll just go into the inventory control module. I'll go into my stock control reports and I'll copy my item valuation. So if all I have to do is right click, copy, and then I can come back to my Montana folder and right click and paste. Okay, so now when I go into my Montana, I'm able to then see, and I could go on and on about, you know, copying and pasting multiple shortcuts to this. Okay. If I right click on this and go properties, if I want to define, perhaps I have defined steps, right? Perhaps this is actually my step number one that I do, and I print, you know, print item valuation, and I want to just say, you know, print item valuations, and I'm going to say apply, right? So now when I go to my Montana, I can see kind of a custom description on this. Okay. If I have another example of organizing my desktop with those custom folders, is if I have screens, if my job, for instance, is as soon as I go into Sage, I'm going to be, you know, perhaps I'm doing, you know, sales order entry. So I always have my order entry open. So then the very next thing that I do after I log into Sage is I go into order entry transactions and then open my order entry screens. So what I can do is I can go back to this screen. I can click on object and new and folder. And this time I'm going to call the folder startup. Okay, so if you're familiar with the windows of functions of this, same thing. So if you're going into order entry, for instance, and I go to order entry, I'm going to copy this and I'll go into the startup and I'll paste this. Okay, and guess what? The next time that I actually log into Sage as the administrator, so it's going to open up Sage, and guess what? It's going to open up my order entry screens because it's contained within the startup folder. So there's my order entry at the bottom, and I could have multiple screens open, right? So if it's only one screen, no big deal, but perhaps instead of opening multiple of those screens all the time, this can be one that's useful. Okay. So this is kind of I'm going to say the quick and easy way of doing things from you know, basically creating a custom folders. The alternate ways to that is the visual process flow. So as I mentioned, out of the box, as you activate the modules within Sage, then there's custom visual process flows that gets deployed, or, you know, that are available to use. Okay. Now, one important thing that I want to share at this stage is, because this is using Adobe Flash, and Adobe Flash as of the end of this month will no longer be supported. Product Sage has come up, like on latest version of Sage is 2021, product update 1. So if you are to install product update 1 2021, that version uses a different technology than Adobe Flash. So it doesn't use Adobe Flash anymore. So it runs on a supported software platform. But the limitation though is you cannot customize your those visual process flows anymore. So what you see is what you get. So just a heads up on this, Sage is, they are looking at alternate ways, and my expectation would be is that they might be deploying, reactivating, I guess, the ability to modify visual process flows. But at this stage, if your company is planning on updating to 2021 with product update 1, then just be advised that the visual process flows with that are no longer customizable, and the main reason being is they're not. It's not because it's on a different platform than the Adobe Flash, because it's no longer supported. Okay, if you don't upgrade, I mean, you're still technically you're still able to customize them, but just be aware that Adobe Flash won't be a supported product come January 1st. And just one more thing before we take a quick pause, I guess, is let me see here. The next slide was the start multiple copies. So that's another one that a lot of folks don't necessarily know that that's available. So this one here, so if you think about, if I'm doing sales order entry, okay, so if I'm in order entry and perhaps I've got a customer on the phone, and then I have another one calling, and I say, okay, let me park this, or I'm in the middle of either checking an order, or perhaps I want multiple orders open at the same time. So out of the box, or just with the straight vanilla install, when I click on order entry, if I basically go in and I have order 1 open and I minimize that, as soon as I go back into order entry, guess what? It just brings back my screen that I had previously open. If you right click on this and go properties, just like we went before, and click on start multiple copies, again, by default, all icons within Sage 300 are not set up this way. So if I click on start multiple copies, I'm going to click on apply and okay. And honestly, I can't recall if I need to log back out of this, but let's try it. So now if I go in and open up order 1 and I double click on order entry, guess what? It's actually opening a second version of this. Okay, so you can now have multiple orders open. I mean, I could share a story on that. You should have seen the eyes of there's a customer that I went in for an education session, just general navigation. And as soon as I showed this, I mean, the owner just got up and basically went and grabbed everybody, all the users from Sage, and said, okay, you got to spare the next hour, just come and, we just learned something that's going to save us like literally hours per week by having the ability to open up multiple screens at the same time. And again, this is an example from an order entry standpoint for orders, but if you think about it from the operational suites, if you want to set up an item and you want to compare this newly set up items with another item, so you could have 2 items on the screen side by side, vendors, customers, right? So any one of those screens can be open with, again, multiple times. On to the next one. This one here, just simple, maybe not as applicable these days because we tend to print less, like pretty much like on physical paper. But having said that, on the if you're using print BAASS or like PDF, for instance, I felt that I still wanted to include this. If for all of you that are like doing sales order entry or perhaps purchase orders, and you're not going to be surprised if I tell you, like, how many times are you asked, right? Are you sure you want to print? Well, to this one, yes. Are you sure? Like, please confirm. So what this does is to confirm on print. If you remove this, it'll actually at least bypass one of the steps. So if you go back to if you open up your Sage from the main menu on the very top, if you click on view and print preferences, if you remove this confirm on print, and again, if you actually have it at the, let's say, on the printer side, so what it does is when you're actually printing, when you're I don't know, let's look at the OE forms and invoice, for instance. So if I print, let's print this one here, and I'm just gonna Control-C, Control-V. So if I print this, and again, my destination is on print on the printer right now, so you'll still get the second prompt as far as what well, depending on the screens you're on, but you'll see that. Just bear with me for a sec. I'm just looking to see if the it is set up for printer, or if actually if you wanted to print on a PDF. So what it does is it basically skips the part where the printer basically opens and where you're, I don't know why this isn't picking up though, unless it's actually printing somewhere. Oh, interesting. It is actually, I do have a, that's interesting. I actually do have a printer set up, so it must be, this could be printing in one of the BAASS office. So I do have a printer set up on this one, so that's why it's actually not asking. So it's actually working. So if I remove this, for instance, so let me just remove this. Apologize for this. So if I actually remove the, or put back the confirm on print, and I go back to the invoices, you'll see that when I hit the, the very first next screen that I do is when I print that, then it's going to ask me, it'll actually come back and say, oh, where do you want to print? Okay, so the remove print confirmations, basically get rid of this step here to confirm where you want to print it. Okay. Just on the same note as that is the next one is the, let's see here, remove this. The next one is the save settings as default. It kind of goes along because obviously if you're going to print, you may actually send your invoice to a different printer than perhaps statements or whatever, right? So that's another one that people don't quite realize. If I go in, for instance, to the invoice, and perhaps think about this. So you may have different spec, right? You may have a summary spec for invoicing and then maybe a detail spec. So depending on the type of work that you do, perhaps in sales order entry, some customers want it in detail, some customers want it in summary. So one options would be, let me just switch it to print preview. So one options would be for the users to come in here and click on browse and then select the proper, perhaps one is called invoice summary, the other one is called invoice detail. What you could do as well is you could copy this, right, and paste it. And then if I was to click on this and say invoice summary, and I'll call this invoice detail, right? So invoice, now I basically have two icons, and then on the invoice summary, I can double click on this, and I can click on which invoice I want to print. So let's assume that this one is actually the spec for summary, and perhaps I actually want to print to a default printer, right? Maybe my summary uses a pre-printed stock for invoicing. So what I could do is if I click on File and Printer Setup, I can actually pick a specific printer for this one report. Now in this case, let's say just OneNote in 2013, and I'm going to click on this. Now, if I want to retain those settings, I can click on Settings and save settings as default. Okay, so this is by user, right? So it doesn't matter which computer I'm logged into. This is saved by user by screen, if you will. So if I double click on this one again, you'll see that it's actually pointing to that INV, OE INV01, and then my printer setup is set for my Office OneNote in 2013. Okay, so now if I wanted to go to the detail one and click on, sorry, not on properties. If I open that, and perhaps this one here, I actually wanted to go to my OneNote 16. Okay, and I'm going to click on that. And perhaps instead of having the OE INV01, I'm going to select the OE INV02. Just to, there you go. Okay, so different spec. And again, I would go in, File, Save Settings as Default. And then the next time I open this one, there's my OE, right, printing to my my specific OneNote 16. And then if you look at the summary one, this one here is going to my other printer, right? Again, so every field, so if you have fields or screens, I'm sorry, where you keep either selecting different features all the time over and over again, just remember this, settings, save settings as default. Just to share on this, those by user automatically, the system as you're perhaps aware, the system will retain what form I last used, but the system won't retain my settings as far as which clicks and then which printer I sent it to. So in order to keep that, then you would have to basically click on Save Settings as default. Okay. We looked about organizing the desktop. The next one is on, let me just share this. So the next one is on cleaning up your screen. So this can be looking after two things. Can be looking at from a security perspective. So if you can't, with the security, you just can't get as granular as you wish. So for instance, I want to allow the need to have access to purchase order, but I don't want the need to modify anything, right? So what you could do is actually remove the post button from my UI profile. So I could basically create a UI profile, and I'll show you how to do that, and then remove the post button. So to basically, again, from a security perspective, that's one way of removing access to a user. The second reason is sometimes just to have a cleaner screen, right? So if you look at, for instance, let me pull the purchase order. So if you look at the purchase order entry and PO, and if I go to purchase order entry, right, there might be some fields in there that I keep tabbing, and perhaps, I don't know, perhaps I'm never using the FOB point. Perhaps I'm never using the, well, PO type is a required field, but perhaps I'm not using the, I don't know, maybe I'm never overriding the vendor's account sets. Okay, so what I can do is, if you just bring up a PO number, if I right click on the header and I go File, Customize, again, this is assuming that I have the rights to perform this, but what I can do is I can actually create a working profile. So I'm going to just call this PO with no FOB. Okay, I'm just going to say PO with no FOB, and I'm going to add this and close. And what I'll do is I'll remove, so this is the list of fields on that screen. Okay, so just bear with me here. So I'll go type date ship to RH comment type. Of course, I'll pick one that's term location. There you go, FOB point. So as I'm removing this, notice on top here how this is now disappearing, right? So if I click on a FOB point, and I'm going to basically save this. Okay, now I've done step one. What I've done is I've actually created the profile. So what I can do is I'm going to go in, I'll go into administrative services, and I'll assign this UI profile to, and let's just use, let's say Andy Porter, right? I'm logged in as admin right now, but what I'll do is I'll actually assign this PO with no FOB to Andy Porter, and I'll close this. So what I'll do now is go in as a Porter, and when I go in and open up the, yeah, just beautiful. I just added, just bear with me for a sec. Admin. Just for instance of times, I'm actually gonna assign this UI profile. Sorry, I'm gonna assign this UI profile to the admin, because Andy is not. I forgot that Andy was not customized directory. UI profile maintenance. That's it. Okay, so there's my profile, and then I'm going to basically assign this UI profile to admin as well. So admin, and I'm going to assign it to the administrator. I just didn't have Andy's credentials, I guess, for the profiles for the other modules. So what I'll do is I'll re-log into the software. I do need to log in again so it basically recognizes my updated UI profile. And if I go back on the purchase order entry screen now, you'll see that as an administrator, I won't see this FOB point. So there's that. Well, there you can't see it, but it's gone. Okay. So just another mean, I guess, just two things. I mean, this is kind of twofold, whether you want to clean up the screen from a better experience and efficiencies as well, so you don't have to tab through the field over and over again, or perhaps it's from a security perspective. Now, if you're into a high number of users environment, the next one is kind of copying security profiles. So um, in the system, and I'll show you where that directory in the user in the Sage 300 data user folder, there's subfolders for each one of the users. And within those subfolders are different files. So the underscore C's basically copies any changes that I've made to finders, hiding columns, those like examples that I shared earlier on about if I created like a custom folder with sub shortcuts, I guess, like all of those could then be copied from user A to user B. And then the underscore P is all the printing preferences. Okay, so if you were to add one user or multiple users, and you wanted those users to basically have those kind of predefined settings automatically, then you could just what you would have to do is come in here and go into, and again, the same concept as earlier on. If you want to know where that directory is, if you go to the About Sage 300 and About System Information, it would be in your shared directory. And if I copy that and bring that here, there's my shared directory and there's my user directory. So for instance, if I go at the ape order, and then there's my ape order, and it's all by company. So in this case, those are my company codes, and then I could go and copy those files and then paste them into the other users, and then that user would basically see, would inherit all of the, I'm going to say customizations or personal settings from the other user. Okay. The next one, that we went on time, so we have this one here is so are we good until Ailey? We're good until actually 3:45. Okay, so I got another 10 minutes.
Yeah,
so
you're good.
Thank you. So the other tool that I want to add is that I wanted to cover was the ops inquiry, and again, following the presentation from Don Thompson, I mean the Tyrox. I don't want to undermine this ops inquiry tools, but I mean following the presentation from Don Thompson, the Tyrox productivity tools or the extender tools, it brings, let's say, the ops inquiries plus, like, tenfolds, I guess, the functionality. But again, if you don't want to have additional investments, I mean, you can basically at least start with using what you have already. And the reason why I wanted to present this is in many instances, I'm finding that either the module is not installed or not being used. Okay, so when you actually, again, I want to make it clear. So if you actually own inventory control today, you are able to go in and activate, you would have licenses for the ops inquiry modules. So the ops inquiries can operate by itself. So if you, as I activated the modules, it's you can see it in the list. The one thing you'll notice though is I'm going to say it's not super sexy. So it's still, I will say it's dated. It hasn't been refreshed for a few versions now. And the main reason for that is that because you have solutions like Tyrox that actually brings functionality like this in tenfolds. What I wanted to show you a couple of things on this. So if you're at the order entry side, it still brings in some interesting efficiencies and information at your fingertips. So from the order entry, so if you pull in, I don't know, let's say pull in an order, if I highlight a line, so my famous fluorescent desk lamp, order 1, if I click on the item drill, okay, what that does is that actually will open the ops inquiry. Takes a few seconds to open, and from this one screen, you've got access to pretty much everything about this item. So how this item is set up, units of measures, any special settings for taxes, for any vendors details that are linked to that items, right? Any contract pricing that you have to customers for this item. If you're looking at sales order entries, it would list all open SOs. If you, I don't know, if you're looking at the histories or POs. I mean, you pretty much have very much like your customer inquiry screen or customer activity screen. Now this is kind of the IC, well, it says it here. So this is the IC item inquiry. So basically everything is available at your fingertips. Okay, so pretty straightforward to use. I mean, you can use it right from, that's available right from the order entry screens, or and PO as well. Or if you actually go into the ops inquiries itself, then you have different ways depending on what you want to drill down on. You've got different ways of drilling down to the information. Now, I do want to highlight something here. So from the setup perspective, depending on the industry, I don't know, maybe you're into jewelry or specialty items, it could be useful to actually see pictures of items. So again, this is kind of one that people don't realize that again, you own this, so you could go in and attach pictures to each items. So under the setup, under options, if you click on use pictures, I can define how I want to keep the pictures. In this case, I kept it simple, so I just said I'm going to use JPEG, and I'm actually going to store the pictures in my C300 data pictures directory. So what I need to do is pretty simple. If as long as I copy within that directory, what I would do is, let me go to here and data, and I just created one called pictures. This could be saved anywhere, and as long as the JPEG file name is named the same as the actual item number, then by default, so I've got one just as a sample called a picture sample. So if I go into my IC item, for instance, and again, this could be accessed from order entry or from different screens, but if I go on the, let me look at this on the Finder, I could have hit that 5 on this, item number contains, and I could go, if I go picture, and there's my sample, and if I click on the units, you actually get to see the picture. That's the actual JPEG file that's contained in my picture directory. Again, depending on the industry, perhaps for your organization, this is not really applicable, but I can certainly think of specific industries where this would be definitely a good feature to have. Okay, pretty simple to implement. Okay. The other one is the global search. So global search was introduced a few versions ago. Again, if you're looking for information, I mean, since we're into the ops inquiries, so for instance, if you have customer whatever, so on the phone, and you know that their customer number, let's say, is 1200, and if you're looking for all transactions that this customer transacted with you, so if you click on global search from the main menu, what you can do is, this is kind of reading, not kind of, this is reading from a database, kind of a site database that it builds. So this should be refreshed on a I'm going to say on a regular basis. I could also refresh it right as I go. Again, probably would discourage the refreshing if you have a very large database. Right now I'm dealing with sample data, so it's fairly quick to refresh. But so what I'll do is, if I go in and I can pick whether I want to look at master files or if I want to look at transactions. So in this case, since we're into the operational modules, I could go here and say, you know what, I'm looking for, I know this customer or perhaps vendor is actually, number was 1200. So if I hit the 1200, in this case, I see transactions in order entry that are with customer 1200. And let me see here, if I go scroll down, see there's 77 results, right? So I can scroll down, and eventually I'm probably going to hit some, there's some invoice, there's some shipments, and if I click on the actual transactions, I'm able to drill down on the actual transactions, right? So there's some limitations as far as which fields are available for lookup, but I mean, it's a great way to get to the information if you know only, like, I'm going to say a partial piece of information if you want to drill down for transactions, right? This does even like amounts. Like if I wanted to search for specific amounts, I mean, it would basically search through the transactional database and then pull out any transactions that contain that amount. Okay. just maybe one last one as we're coming up to the quarter two. In this one here, I can't show you, but I do want to talk about it. So as far as efficiencies, interesting enough, I mean, I had a discovery call with a prospect this morning, and their main challenge was trying to reduce the time from job completion to collecting cash. So in 2021, there's now a feature, kind of a pay now feature. So integrated with Sage 300, when you're actually pushing out order entry, OE invoice, credit notes. Well, even not credit notes is you're not going to refund, but OE invoice and AR invoices. There's now on the standard forms, there's now a pay now button, and if you actually register, you can actually register with PayPal or Stripe, and then as you're emailing those documents to your customers, if they click on the pay now button, they can make payment through their PayPal account or Stripe, and that's all integrated in your system. So that's a great feature. Again, just really reducing the rekeying and then speeding up the collection process of collecting cash. Ailey, do I have time for another quick one, or you want to?
Of course.
Open the floor for questions, or?
I will prompt people to, if you want to have any questions about any of the tips we've talked about, or you've thought of a question about this, feel free to add it into that question window. But if you have another tip, go right ahead, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the next one I have was the create PO from sales orders. This one was added a few versions ago, but I wanted to bring it up again. Maybe not applicable to all organization, or perhaps to your specific organization based on your process. But this one here allows you to. It's more operational, but basically within inventory control. If you can basically link, so if you go to items and price list and go to vendor details, and I have one pre-built in here, so my famous, again, fluorescent desk lamp, you have up to 9 vendors that you can basically link between your item number and then who you're buying from. You can either even put what their item number is, and you can maintain costs on this. Okay, so again, I want to stress that you can have up to nine vendors at this stage. So the idea is, if you're in order entry, and again, depending on your process, this may or may not be applicable to your organization. If you have a procurement department, you wouldn't necessarily have, from a CSR perspective, crank out purchase orders. But I know lots of cases where this may make a total sense and save you some time and keystrokes. So if you go to, I don't know, let's say we're just going to set up an order for a Bargain Mart, and we're going to add this fluorescent desk lamp on the order, and let me just go in, put in a value of, I don't know, let's say put in a value of 10, and I'll just do an insert, and I'm going to post this order. Okay, so I won't print it. So if you once it's posted, what you'll see at the bottom left of the screen is this create PO. So what that does is, if you, and we're going to assume that there's not enough on hand to basically supply demand, so we'll go and crank a PO. So if you click on create PO, what it does is it knows that you're looking for generating a PO for items that are on this order. So it knows that it's for customer 1100 to 1100. It filters it down to this specific order, which you could still expand on the range, but in this case, it's got these pre-filtered. The dates are pre-filtered. It defaults to vendor 1, but if you add, perhaps internally, vendor 1 is the preferred one, but perhaps vendor 9 is on maybe seasonally, in fall you would order from vendor 9, whatever. So you can pick which vendors you want to select, and then if I want, I can say only include items that are insufficient in stock. So if I click on this, nothing would happen because I've only ordered 10, and there's pretty much 137 available. Or I could say, you know what, basically include all items or only items on back order from this order. Okay, so if I click on include all items and I hit the process, what it'll do is go in, look at all items on this, not just the ones that I highlighted, but all items on this order. And in this case, it would create one purchase order. Now, if there's multiple orders, multiple items, with different vendors, then I can basically say, do you want to consolidate items, or you don't want to consolidate the items as well, right? So how do you want to those purchase orders be created? So now the nice thing about this is if you actually go to the purchase order, and I go to the PO screen, and again, I do want to stress, I mean, I realize that this is literally creating an actual purchase order. So you may actually go through a procurement process in your environment, but what it does is it actually tag this PO detail line to the actual sales order. So when I actually receive this on my receiving report, I can basically highlight and point to, you know, which order can now be basically shipped or fulfilled, right? And then I can, I mean, there's also reports on this that can say, you know, give me all my shippable back orders based on what I have in stock. So I think I'll stop here and perhaps open the floor to see if there's any questions.
One of the questions we got is there a document available that outlines all the Sage 300 shortcuts?
Yeah, so I tell people that your kind of your best buddies, your first line of resource is the F1. I mean, that's F1 I didn't cover in the shortcuts earlier on, but the F1 will actually bring up the help menu. And if I go to the F1 and just simply type shortcuts, so the Sage help, as you can tell, it's all online now. So it's context sensitive if you're actually looking for help on a specific screens. But if you're looking for helps on a topic, so for instance, if I click on shortcuts, if I click on data entry tools and shortcuts, for instance, there's my, you know, there's some shortcuts available for you, right? So everything, pretty much all the help or documentations is online now, but you have the ability to search for keywords.
Amazing. Follow-up question to that was, will there be a handout available for this session? And to answer that, currently there is not a handout, but we will be sending out the recordings, and I can make sure to grab the copies of that link that Denis has shared, just to make sure that that is available as well. So I will definitely be in the replay thank you email that would be going out once the recordings are ready.
Excellent.
I'm not sure, Denis, do you have any other?
I mean, I can certainly
PDFs
share
or
the
checklists?
well, I can certainly share the presentation per se.
Yeah.
I mean, I can certainly do that by all means, which kind of highlights some of the features. So.
Perfect. Another question is, will my custom visual process flows still work when we install Sage 300 version 2021 with product update 1?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a question that that's a bit of a concern, because so as I highlighted, the Adobe Flash, so nothing to do with Sage. From the Adobe Flash standpoint, it's not supported. It won't be supported come January 1st. So Sage has moved to a new, I'm going to say, backend platform, I guess, to replace Adobe. At this stage, what you see is what you get. So what I mean by that is, if you've actually customized visual process flows, you would still be able to use them, but there's actually, but you won't be able to customize them. So that's a certainty. So, you know, again, if you install product update 1 with 2021, okay, there is a knowledge base article, and it's knowledge base, it's KB 107531, so 107531. So if you go on Sage support and type in knowledge base or KB 107531, there is a document on this, and if like what it highlights as well, like, I mean, even though your customized process flow should work, there might be issues with, you know, things like fonts, and certain areas might be blurry. So it seems like it's, you know, there's potentials for for screens to be a little quirky. They do guarantee that the out of the box will work, but again, you're limited to no customization. Is what you see is what you get. They do highlight that the ones from the IC out of the box, you'll have some issues with inventory control. Why? I'm not sure about that, but I know on the knowledge base it kind of highlights that one.
Uh, I will make sure to share the resource for that knowledge base article as well.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question, and that is, if I open multiple copies of a screen, for example, order entry, would I be consuming multiple land packs licenses?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the short answer is no. So um, opening multiple screens, not an issue. And on top of that as well is as an FYI, I mean, I'm trying to think back like which versions, but I mean, it's been a while since if you have multiple companies open from the same user. For instance, I could have Sam Inc. open here on my computer, and then I could basically reopen Sage a second time. And as long as it's with the same user logged in, I would still only be consuming one LAN pack. So back in the days, and we're going back. I mean, some of you might still be on older version. Um, Back in the days, you would be consuming two LAN packs if I actually have two companies open. Now, if you're on the same sessions, so either on your local desktop or on a terminal server with the same user, you can have multiple companies open at the same time with only consuming one LAN pack or one license. So again, but just to clear and confirm the multiple screens and no issues whatsoever, no matter what version you have installed.
That's really good news. Uh, I want to say thank you so much, Denis, for presenting.
You're welcome. My pleasure.